Oh, noting that it's 7:03 p.m. on October 16th, 2024, I will call the Board of Health meeting to order. And first thing we'll do is, since it's a virtual meeting, we'll go around and announce our presence. So Daryl Beardsley, present.
Steve Constantine, present.
Julie Dreyfus, present.
Diana Hook, present.
Great. So we don't have any variance hearings this evening, but we do have a number of items to cover. And Mark noted that the person for 226 Western Avenue is here, so perhaps we could take that first.
That is correct, Daryl. So if the board's okay with that, I'll do the introduction. The owner is here. You'll see Leonardo with his son. Hi guys. And they're looking to finish the basement, and you'll see the house plans are right here. Back in April of 2023, about a year and a half ago, they finalized the septic system for a septic system that can handle 4 bedrooms. And the board has seen these plans prior, I think prior to the system being installed. And they work to make sure that, and so the finished basement, as you can see there, is going to be with a half bath or no bathroom. But this is the old plan. I believe the new plan is suggesting a half bath in the building app. But the first floor, the board had worked with Leonardo and his family. We looked at that to, I think you'll have to go down a couple because there's some more, more defined plans here. So this is the...
And I think we don't have to look at all of this first floor existing, because I think that was the original house that was 1 story.
Yes,
So
it was a 1-story. That is
here.
correct. And what happened, though, they rearranged things on the first floor. You'll see there's a half bath. If we start on the upper right, there's a half bath in the exercise room.
Yeah.
And that board had worked with Leonardo on that. And then we have the kitchen below that. And then there's another room, an office below that. And so there's 3 rooms there. And then there's 2 labeled rooms. There's the living room and the other one's labeled. I got to get to my plan. It's hard to see the screen.
Dining room, yeah.
Dining. So you have what I count as 5 on the first floor.
Okay.
And then when you go to the second floor, that's where it gets a little tricky, because if you look to the bottom left, you will see there's a bedroom with a room off the bedroom and a slide doors. They're rooms, but the board allowed them to count that as 1 bedroom as a suite. But it does present itself as 2 rooms. So, but as 1 bedroom, as the board reviewed.
Yeah.
And then you have your
just this 1 point of access here. I mean, there is here, but it's through a bathroom and another bedroom. So.
Excuse me. Yep. No, that is correct. And then the other room is just above that, Daryl. That's another bedroom. And then you have a bedroom next to that. And then the hallway and the laundry and all that. And then the master bedroom over there. So there's 5 rooms on the second floor, but counted as 4 bedrooms, because there's basically the big suite right there on the bottom left. And so with that said, if we count this as 4 rooms and the first floor is 5 rooms, then the basement's going to create the 10th room, possibly 11th. But again, this has been reviewed by the board. In my view, it would at least create a 10th room. And I did already explain to Leonardo that we have allowed basement rooms at a below grade, which this one is. I've toured the house at the time of the certificate being issued, and this is below grade, that if he wishes to finish this, which we discussed back then, there may be the need for a deed recording to just note that this is a 4-bedroom house. And so there's no question to that issue if someone's doing a Title V and they're selling the house, that they know it's a 4-bedroom, if the board so wishes to allow the finished basement with a deed recording. So I did a lot of talking.
We have done that. So.
Yeah.
So there are no windows at all here. I don't even see
cellar
any,
windows, but Leonardo, can you unmute and ask? The question was, are there cellar windows in the basement, or big windows?
Yes. No, we got a bulkhead right here on the. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can you can see what I'm on the right. So go to the right.
Okay,
So yeah, so we got a door there, like
okay,
a little bit up.
a little bit up.
Yeah,
Okay.
right there. So we got a door. It's no bulkhead. It's like entrance door there, and I got small windows. Like I got a one, two, three, four. It's about four small windows on that section.
So when
Okay.
you walk out that door, are you standing on ground or do you go upstairs?
You go upstairs. We got steps there.
Yeah, it's below grade, Daryl. I've been in
It's
there.
below
Okay.
grade, but they have a drainage. So it's like if it's rain, they have a drainage, but it's not like a bulkhead. You don't need to open the bulkhead there.
Okay. Okay. So that sounds consistent with rooms that we've treated as really don't have the potential to be bedrooms because they don't offer the kind of, well, this one does have 2 egress, so that does in a way offer it, but not having windows is another
Leonardo,
larger size windows is
Sorry,
something that
Daryl.
we've considered.
Yeah.
as
and I was just,
qualifying.
yep. Daryl, I was just gonna ask Leonardo about the bathroom. Are you still planning a half bathroom in the basement, Leonardo, the finished basement?
If you're allowed to, just a half bathroom, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Daryl. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I'm just confirming that that's your recollection of what we've done in the past.
Yes.
Nothing on there. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for Mark or Leonardo?
I did. So the door in the basement, you said it wasn't a bulkhead or it's a normal door up the stairs?
The normal door up the stairs, yes.
No, okay. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I think
Otherwise, I'll describe. I think what we've often done is the deed recording will say that, you can't add a full bathroom down there. You can't make any other rooms without having to upgrade the septic system. And that you should never use this as a bedroom or make it like even an in-law apartment or something else, because unless you eliminate some rooms upstairs. So it would have those kind of restrictions on it for the septic system sizing.
And we do have a boilerplate type of a deed restriction that Leonardo, if the board so wishes to approve this, could have him take that to his attorney to file it and so forth.
Yeah. And it's just to let people know, because they see all this space and they might think there's much more that could be done, and they just need to be aware of what the limitations are. And this is our chance to get those things on record for any future owners. But hopefully you'll have many happy years here. Do you have any questions about this?
Daryl, I have a quick question. Leonardo,
go right ahead.
as we're looking at what was proposed, I just want to make sure that what was actually built is consistent with what had been proposed originally. So for the second floor, the library was labeled as library study room. And it appears that the only entrance and exit from that room is through the bedroom that it adjoins. Just want to confirm that that is the only way into and out of that study room.
Can you screw down so I can look at it?
That there is not a doorway directly into the hallway from that room.
No, it's just one door, and that's not. So if you see the library, that you see the like 2 sliding door, looks like a sliding door. It's not. We don't have that, and the walls is much small. The walls like only 2 feet wide, and it's all open room.
Oh, okay. So these sides coming
It's
out
much smaller
are
than there.
smaller.
Yeah, it's smaller, and we don't
And
have that. It's only one room. It's one room.
Okay.
We update the plan, but I don't know. We have that plan update. But I don't know why it's showing. You still have the door here.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
is the
this
plan
is-
that Chris gave
This
me.
is the second revision. This is the only one I have.
Yeah.
And you guys mentioned to make the door small and to take that door out. So, and you guys should have the plan.
Okay.
You guys suggest that on the time when before we build. So we update plan and we make the walls much smaller, and we don't have the door there.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Leo.
Okay,
If we
any
go
other
back to
board
the
members? have-
basement, I just had a question. Where are the garage doors?
On the first floor to the left.
So the two garages are separated, and then there's two
Yeah.
garage doors in one and one in the other.
Yeah, it's on the other. You can see on the foundation plan. It's on the other.
Mm.
The first floor, I think, Daryl, would be
The
where.
Oh, okay. Ah, yes,
There you go.
sorry. Takes a while to come into focus. Okay. So three cars here and two here.
Yeah, 3-car. It's
Okay.
not basement underneath, just a slab, just a garage.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Alright,
it is confusing because the basement, you see the outline, but that's just a slab that would be
That's the
really
slab.
the ceiling of the rest of the basement, I believe.
Okay, I get it. Thanks.
Okay, anything else on the board? Leonardo, otherwise I'll go to
And-
Bob, has his hand up.
and the
Oh,
other
Go ahead.
On the basement, can you a little bit down, please?
Uh,
Oops, back.
Anywhere,
Actually, up. You make it too small. I can't see.
oh, sorry, hold on. Where the other protrusion is that what I'm
Well,
after?
On the basement, they have a small section on the other side. New cook. Yeah, go. Yeah, right there, on the right.
On the right. Further right?
Yes. So you see new
Okay,
slab to be built. That's part for the basement, but we're not gonna do finish that section. That section's not gonna be finished. Won't be finished. That's unfinished. That's all the equipment's there, like the furnace, all the electrician, everything is that room. So we're not gonna finish that room.
okay, this one here. All
Yeah,
right,
because if you look at the plan, they can take like it's gonna make a 2-room there, but it's only the basement, so it's only big section, just only the whole section. So that part is not gonna be anything there.
okay. All right, so these are at the top, but this is actually a room now, underneath the exercise room,
Yes.
equipment room, underneath the exercise
Yeah.
room. Okay. All right. So Bob,
Great, thank
Question?
you, thank you. So I have absolutely no objection to Mr. Rodriguez being able to do this project, no objection at all. But to me, it's always been hard, I think, for the public and for myself to understand kind of the way you go about these things. And so I think this is a great example to have you clarify some things. So I'm interested, if you could go back to the upstairs part of this plan.
how far upstairs?
Uh,
First
the-
floor,
the-
second
the-
floor?
The second floor, sorry, second floor. Whoops.
I made it too small. So sorry.
There you go, right there, Daryl.
Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah. Now if it'll just resolve, yep. Great. So I think it's pretty clear that you're counting on the bottom part of the plan, the thing that calls itself a guest room and then a library study. Because that doesn't have a separate entrance, you're considering that a suite and calling all of that space one bedroom. I think you said that before.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
correct, yeah. And then, so you know, you've got 1, 2, a very large primary, 3, and then this guest room / library study, which is 4. So there are obviously 4 bedrooms upstairs. When you go to do the room count, and I think Mark was alluding to this earlier, and I just want to clarify. If you've got a very large suite like here with a guest room and a study off of it, that counts as 1 room, I assume?
Yes.
That's 1 room, okay.
As long as it's open, you know, as this one's open to each other.
Well, I think he said it has sliders on it.
No, it's
Yeah,
nice
no-
like
No,
No, it's
He
an
said it
oh,
does
cased
not have
cased opening? Is like,
It's
it's a
all
cased
open.
opening? Yeah,
All
okay.
open.
So basically, when you go to count the rooms and divide by 2, that guest room / library study counts as 1 room in your thinking, right? Okay, and then, so my next question, so there are obviously therefore 4 rooms on that floor. So go down a floor to the main floor. And here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms on that floor. Am I doing that right also?
They're
Uh,
labeled as 5 rooms.
it's actually it's only 3 rooms.
Well,
you-
how is the board counting it? That's what I'm interested
okay,
in.
I see.
Leonardo, I'm interested in how the board thinks about it.
So I guess maybe you came in a little late, Bob. We did go through this. So this
Sure.
is 1,
Yep,
2,
yep.
3, 4, 5.
Okay, so that's
We
5.
do look at function to some degree because when you have open plan concepts,
Sure.
and some can be truly wide open,
Yep.
but have different functions taking place, such as kitchen.
Yeah, no,
we
no,
do
the
count
5,
those as
the 5
rooms.
makes sense to me in this case. So you've got 4 upstairs, you've got 5 here, that's 9. And this is a 4-bedroom system or a 5-bedroom system?
4-bedroom.
4-bedroom
4.
system. Okay, so then this gets to an important question that I have in terms of the board policy. So you've got 9 here, and therefore I'm assuming that a deed restricted finished space in the basement does not count as either a bedroom or a room. Am I right about that?
Does not count towards the bedroom count.
But does it count as a room?
Yes.
A
except
deed
we're
restricted
deed
room.
restricting it so that it won't be a bedroom, which is what the underlying assumption is within Title V about what influences what kind of use a septic system has.
Okay, so I think I'm getting it. You're saying that you've got four rooms upstairs. You've got 5 rooms as 9, but the basement is not 10 divided by 2 getting to 5. So it's kind of like the basement's a freebie in the room count.
The deed restricted room.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to get at. So he doesn't have 10 divided by 2 and is out of compliance here. Now, obviously, that's what you think, and that's great.
Yes, it's something that can be done at the discretion of the board.
So it's different for different folks.
No, we try to apply the same kind of conditions each time, which is why we were asking, again, you might have missed all of this. We were asking about, can you walk out to grade? That makes it a no. So is it a full bath? That would make it a no. There are a bunch of other things that come into play.
Okay, so obviously a half bath works. So I'm just trying to understand, if you have 4 rooms up, if you have a 4-bedroom system and you have 4 rooms upstairs and 5 rooms on the main floor is 9, and then you finish the basement, that doesn't get you to 10 divided by 2 is now 5 and you fail. You're saying this is compliant.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
With the deed restriction.
Yeah,
with the
no,
deed
absolutely with the deed restriction. I just wanted to, because I think this is a really good house to have you all explain to all of us in the public how you do this count, and this is perfect.
We actually have made this explanation many, many times
Oh, yeah,
every
no,
year.
no, I've heard it. No, it's perfect.
And we go through all the same criteria for every
Perfect.
house.
Perfect. I'm
So-
very happy and I'm grateful that you all went through it with me, and I hope that Leonardo uses that space in good health.
Oh, the kids will enjoy.
No, this is perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So Mark, you're looking for approval
With the deed
or
recording.
authorization for you to approve the plans and then with the condition of a deed recording?
Yes, and that would be prior to the approval of the building app, that the deed recording be completed.
Yes. Okay. Does anyone else on the board have any comments to make, or are we ready to move to voting? All right, so do we have a motion to authorize Mark to approve the plans conditional to receipt of a deed recording restricting the use of the basement?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Steve Constantine, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
And Daryl Beardsley, aye. Okay, thank you, Leonardo. And if you have any questions, just let Mark know and we'll get the language to you.
Okay.
About
Leonardo, you can drop by the office tomorrow and Jean should be able to get you that boilerplate form for the deed recording.
All right, Mark.
Restriction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night,
Good night.
everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Okay, Mark, is there anyone else here for your, under your
We-
agenda items?
Bob's here for
Yep.
lot 3,
Yeah.
65 Palm Road.
All right, so let's take that next. Give me a moment, so. Are there any plans in particular that we want to look at? I have
There
a
was,
10-1 version. I have one called Lot 3 R2.
and this is the permit numbers of 246061. Back in 2022, there was another submittal that was basically withdrawn from the applicant. That was the original 220809 was withdrawn from the applicant. So we're reviewing application number 2460-61, which is a well and septic system request. And the engineer did revise the plan on September 19th with a letter that was forwarded to us. We got the plans on September 26th of this year. And the discussion was the locust plan, which has been upgraded to show the lot as well as legal boundaries, which the discussion was that would be done prior to the release of the septic plans. And the other discussion was the major discussion, which is the open surface drain and the distance to it from the proposed septic system.
Okay. Do I have the most appropriate plans up?
Let's see, Darrell, the ones I have a revision date of 9/19/24 at the bottom panel up
Okay.
to the right. I just can't see the full
Yeah.
bottom right. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
And I believe that is the most recent plan, with the 9/11 and 9/19 is the most recent revisions.
Okay, yep, yep.
Yes.
It does say
9:30
copy of current
actually.
plan.
September 30 on the very
What was that, Desheng?
The last revision is September 30th, actually,
Okay, have we
Okay.
received that?
on the
Plan.
very
All right,
top
let
of
me,
that.
there is another one.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Uh,
Desheng, there's another
Called
revision.
R2.
Okay,
That's
So on
what I
the, on
wasn't
the
sure.
title box on the top, you see that, because we run out of space for the notes. Yeah.
Oh, right
it's-
here?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm sure nobody else can see that.
oh,
Me.
okay, yes, I couldn't see it either. Okay.
I see.
Oh, to update the locus, thank you, Desheng.
If we combine that, okay. Oh, so maybe you want to call that 5. Right, because this is
Yes,
1,
it is
2,
5.
3, 4. It
Right.
should be 5 up here. All right. Okay. Okay, any particular part I should be bringing on screen?
Well, you may want to go to the
All loads.
street side, Daryl, and where the
Okay,
existing pipe
And
drain is
this-
shown. And it just has to. I think it'll show up if the plan focuses into it.
yeah,
And
all right. It'll take a moment. I don't think, do we need this section?
there we go. I think that where you are with the pointer, yeah, that's a better
Yeah.
plan to look at
Okay. All
and right.
right.
Right about where that red line's going through, to the left is the existing drain pipe. And presently that's 65 feet from the edge of the soil absorption system, the leaching area.
Okay, may as well start talking. It's going to take a while for it to
Okay,
adjust to all the layers.
so we left off with determining if the distance of 65 feet falls into the same criteria that the Board of Health would consider, which would be 125 feet for an open surface drain. So that was the discussion at hand.
Mhm. Okay. Julie, would you want to review that?
Sure. And so one of the, we had kind of couple of perspectives that we were discussing and weighing with this. One was the idea of a new variance, a variance to new construction, excuse me, with the understanding that we will probably in the future be evaluating this regulation relative to the 125, and for the board, currently DEP to a swell like this requires 10 feet. The other perspective that we were kind of weighing back and forth was going back to precedent. Precedent for the what was then Lot 2, now 53 Farm Road, to see how the board looked at this at that time. And my understanding, based on having looked at the minutes and even having gone back to review the old video, was that that drain pipe was not closed off at that time, and that is consistent with what I have gotten also from members of the town. So when the determination for this lot was made, that was open. And so in kind of summation to what was looked at, from the perspective of the board, in terms of complying with this regulation for the 125 relative to an open surface drain and water courses, and after consulting with DEP, from DEP's perspective, this is not applicable, a drainage swale of this kind. And then they really deferred to water courses of concern for DEP would be those that fall within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And so looking at the Conservation Commission definitions for water courses, this type of a drainage swale is not applicable either. And then the determination of the board back in, I believe it was 2021, November of 2021, was that as a result, our regulation of 125 is not triggered because this does not meet the qualifications for that, for the water course. One of the things, and so in looking at this project, my understanding was that this has received Conservation Commission review and had a negative determination made by that board. It was just brought to our attention recently by an abutter, of which we will note that their input a little later. Who they sent a letter but cannot be present today, that determination is under appeal. That was not something known to this board at our last meeting. And so just in terms of process, one of my kind of questions to the board would be kind of how to handle it is if we have like our process is you have Conservation Commission determination and then it comes to us for review. If their determination is in an appeal process, and my understanding that's gone to the state, then it seems that that process needs to conclude for us to then continue. It sounds like the appeal was not specific to this drainage swale, and I think that is certainly relevant. It was, and I'm going to go back to the letter from our abutter because this was something I just recently learned about. The appeal is based on this being a phased and segmented project and should not be entitled to the stormwater single-family residence exclusion for stormwater requirements. And I know that that abutter is not here to speak, but I'm sure we can also, I think we could just ask Bob if he could update us on the status of that appeal, because I'm sure he's aware of it. Bob, could you let us know where that is? Because we're getting this a little late.
Yeah, so the RDA was filed for work that is in the jurisdiction of the local authority. The local wetland bylaw says that that you have to that you have a buffer zone of 100 feet from land subject to flooding. The work that is being done on this project that was given a negative determination under the local bylaw is being done from 90 to 100 feet from the land subject to flooding. It is well more than 100 feet from any wetlands and not in jurisdiction. I will tell you that the jurisdiction of the State Wetlands Protection Act for land subject to flooding, which is what the we're working, 90 feet in this project from for the land subject to flooding. The setback under the State Wetlands Protection Act is 0 feet. Okay, so I sought a determination that the local bylaw was not applicable. I did not seek a determination under the state bylaw because I'm 90 feet from jurisdiction. It's irrelevant. You're right. A frivolous appeal has been filed. And I have been told by the Conservation Commission historically that because these neighbors did the same thing 3 years ago. DEP dismissed it. And I was told that I could proceed at my own risk, which I did. I built a house. You approved plans, and I built 53 Farm Road during an appeal. Now that was actually on a state where I was seeking approval under the state rules, and I built that house. And it is not relevant or in your jurisdiction. Now, as a practical matter, if there's a problem on the conservation side of things, I won't be able to go forward. But it's not within your jurisdiction or within your purview to worry about a frivolous appeal made by abutters to the Conservation Commission. And it's, you know, it's not something that should concern you as the current nominee for vice president on the Democratic ticket says, you know, we all need to mind our own business and focus on our own issues. And I would ask that this board focus on Board of Health regulations tonight, not on Conservation Commission regulations. And I'm happy to answer any questions based on what I just explained.
So I guess one thing I heard is that that you have been willing to take on any risk that might be associated with proceeding until an issue is resolved.
Yeah,
one way or the other.
it's at my risk. Obviously, if somehow, I mean, this is a frivolous appeal. If somehow I lost that appeal, it would be at my peril, no doubt about it. But honestly, I'm willing to take that risk because I see that risk as zero. And like I said, it's not in Board of Health. It's not in Board of Health purview. Let me deal with the Conservation Commission and their regulations. It's not for you to enforce those.
Well, except that we just have our general policy of not proceeding until things are resolved at earlier stages. But we have also looked at at-risk issues. I'm talking. We have also looked at someone taking on risk. We've allowed projects to, say, move to putting in a foundation when certain issues are open, but we don't do it often. Okay.
Do you have a regulation that governs this situation?
No, of course not. We rely on the Conservation Commission.
Right. And the Conservation Commission will not allow me to proceed with the project if they think it's a problem. And like I said, I built 53 Farm Road under the exact same circumstances because we all know.
I heard that.
We all, well, I'm repeating it because I think it's important.
Anyone else have any questions?
No, I don't think I have a question. It sounds like this, well, I guess the resolution of this could potentially be a condition that we attach to an approval. Is I think how I would imagine this could potentially work. But I also, you know, defer back to, I guess it'd be Mark and Daryl at this point to tell us any precedent of how this has been handled, but this is an unusual situation. Or I should say not typical.
Anyone else?
I will just note, I'm having trouble clicking it. For the chat, we do not monitor the chat and it is not part of our public record. But if you are a member of the public and choose and want to speak up, please raise your hand. And when we take further questions from the public, we'll be happy to acknowledge you.
Okay, were there any other points that you wanted to make, Julie?
So I think that was, because I'm trying to recall, I think we had gone through and reviewed the soil testing and the perks, and we had looked at setbacks, and I don't recall us flagging anything at the last meeting regarding any of that part of the process, unless someone remembers differently. Or has seen something.
That is correct, Julie. We the things that would be pending are the legal lot boundaries, the legal boundaries, as well as, if the board so wishes to approve, there's gonna be the requirement for a deed recording for the garbage grinder. And obviously, the discussion we're having on the open surface drain, that the board will need to decide how you want to handle that. And the Conservation Commission, having approved it, how do you want to handle an appeal? Which, when you ask that question, Julie, I don't remember seeing this happening in previous years, so I don't have any history on how this was handled in the past. That's from my recollection. I'm not for sure if the other board members might remember any situation of this type. It's, to me, it's the first time I've seen this type of situation.
Right, I don't think it's common for Conservation Commission either.
Yeah. But kind of continuing with, if we're looking back in time, looking at what the board had wrestled with back for what was on lot 2. There were kind of two issues that the board at that time was wrestling with. One was sequencing and process. And subsequently from all of that, many of those concerns were addressed in our recent regulatory update that took effect in November of 2023. The other portion of that larger discussion, because this discussion certainly extended beyond that of watercourse, was the idea of segmentation of a larger project. And there was also a regulatory update made by this board, again, taking effect in November of last year, addressing kind of what is a project, and then kind of what is the requirement. What is the requirement for an EHIR? And that would be 10 homes or greater, or 2,000 gallons per day or greater, as well as the amount of earth removal, 350 cubic yards. And so one of the things that we're kind of wrestling with is, as a board, is how do we kind of look at this? I think we understand, and I know, Bob, you've shared this freely amongst town, and I think it's going to be discussed in the very near future too, that you're intending to build additional homes on these 2 parcels. And so, once we get over 2,000 gallons per day, or anything over 18 bedrooms, then that triggers our newer regulation for an EHIR. And so how do we make sure that anything that we potentially approve, that we condition it so that it is understood in that larger environmental health impact report that can come later on? And I think that is the legal part of this that we're trying to figure out, and we are seeking legal advice for that at this time. And that's what makes it a little tricky to make sure anything we were to do tonight was crafted correctly. And I would hate for us to mess that part up. Does anyone from the board have a question about that? I'm not sure if I said it clearly.
No, that's correct. We've submitted a request for guidance to town council about that sequencing, spoken to MIPA about the sequencing. And when what we're seeing as a project is coming in pieces, how do we approve one portion when the thresholds haven't been reached but are anticipated?
And that just echoes back. And again, I think this was with the previous iteration of this board, it tried to better capture in the regulations from the abutters at that time. I think many of which are still the same folks. It may even be present on this call. I can't see everyone. The concerns from abutters at the time were not necessarily specific or voiced loudly in relation to the drainage swale. It was in relation to the cumulative impacts of development on this site, specific to their water, quantity and quality of their water. And so I think that was the bigger issue for the board at the time, was how to capture and understand that. And so it doesn't necessarily apply to this particular lot, but it applies to the larger project, or what will be potentially eventually a larger project of greater than 2,000 gallons per day. So I'm a little unsure as to how to craft this. Because in terms of, you know, setbacks and design flow, you know, this is certainly approvable. And if the board chooses to adopt the same interpretation that it did in 2021, that this drainage swale does not meet our regulatory threshold of triggering that 125, then that is no longer a concern that we deal with here. Certainly, we will consider updating that regulation in the future. But the segmentation of a project is the bigger challenge, I think, that we still face.
Yeah, and how to condition that now.
Yeah, and how
so
to
that the applicant is aware of what, you know, what will be coming and what might change or change what's being done here.
Julie, you can only regulate what is before you. And there is one home before you tonight. There is a second application before you. I may never come forward with any more. I may come forward with 2 more.
We understand that.
But the fact
what we
is,
need to do.
you can only regulate what is before you. The other thing I would ask you, Julie, to do is bring up on the screen regulation section 3 of your regulations and read the title of the regulation.
Well, I don't have that immediately handy, Bob.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
let me
neither
go
do
on
I.
the internet and I'll bring it up and I'll read it to you. I apologize that I don't have it at hand. This is a completely new issue that you were raising 6 weeks into the application, okay? 2 weeks ago, we spoke for 2 hours on this project, and you never mentioned this issue. You have ambushed me tonight after 6 weeks on this issue. You have ambushed me tonight. That is bad faith dealing.
That is, we are not ambushing you.
You have not mentioned this issue throughout a 6-week review and a 2-hour conversation 2 weeks ago. You're all of a sudden springing this.
This proposal before us, and you are right, we only handle what is before us.
That's right. And that's what I'm asking you to do tonight. I'm sorry I'm upset, but I feel like you have jumped me. And I don't like that. We talked for 2 hours about this application.
Okay, thank you, Bob. The point is, the board is wrestling with a larger issue. It is not whether or not this is an approvable plan. It's how do we take a larger issue into context? Is it something that we condition and take into consideration now with this approval? Or do we wait for it to be triggered in the future? We are waiting for legal counsel on that issue.
I don't think...
Bob, we are discussing this as a board because, as you know, we are unable to discuss this, all 5 of us together. Well, Rebecca's not here, but for the majority of us to be here and discuss this.
Okay.
This is not an attempt to ambush you. This is the first time as a board we've been able to talk about this beyond the issue of the drainage swale. And actually, we haven't been able to check in with the rest of the board, and I think we should actually do that now to see how people are feeling about treating the, whether we're calling it, I think this is a language barrier, open surface drain or drainage swale, how we want to treat that. If we want to treat that consistent with what was done in 2021, recognizing that this does not reach the level of water course and therefore doesn't trigger our regulation, or if we want to handle it differently. I think we still have to resolve that issue as a board. I think I've made my position clear, but would love to hear from other people.
Right, and I've spoken in the past, so I'd like the other board members to have a chance to share their thoughts, comments, and questions.
So Julie, getting back to what you had gone over before, I understand that when the previous board reviewed, well, the situation, the drain, the pipe, and there was no water. So whether it was open or closed, I mean, I could understand where they came to their conclusion. There's no water, Bob go build. But there appears to be water now, but not much, is what I understand. And so did I understand from you that I guess how we term it, we're looking at what, a drainage swale, or we're looking at a water course, but it didn't really trigger either definition?
So with yeah. So I think at the time, the pipe was open. And at the time of this application, there was not water actively flowing through it. There was certainly it was described as a depression that showed at some point there historically had been some amount of water that had flown through or had gone through. And the question had been, this had been described as a water course. And in our regulations, it's kind of weirdly bunched together, where it says an open surface drain or water course setbacks 125 feet. And for water course, it then describes all of the things that typically fall into the purview of the Conservation Commission: streams, lakes, ponds. And so to better understand from a public health perspective, the board reached out to DEP to get their take on what is a concern from the perspective of a water course relative to an SAS. And for DEP, something like this where the primary purpose is drainage and it was related to precipitation, it was not a continual flow, it was not a concern to them. And in terms of regulatory jurisdiction, they said, you know, we are concerned about the things that would fall under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. Again, streams, ponds, wetlands. And so to that, we turn to the Conservation Commission and look at their review for if it's in their jurisdiction and applicability. And in that case, it had gone through review and had not been determined as something within a water course in their jurisdiction. And that's why we bring up the current negative applicability here, just to make sure we address it. And then recognizing that it is not in relation to this swale. It is in relation to, as Bob denoted, the floodplain, or the the land that floods a setback. I'm sorry, just again, that is not my purview, what they exactly look at. Does that make sense? And so then the kind of the therefore that the board determined is, well, therefore this does not trigger a regulation because it doesn't meet this definition. And that's how they were able to approve an SAS less than 125 feet from this drainage swale or open surface drain. And we could go back and forth about how we want to, exactly what the definition is and the term is part of our challenge.
Thank you.
Steve, can you weigh in and tell us what
Steve?
Yeah, I can, I'll be honest with you, I went out and tried to find the drainage pipe. Mark was kind enough to show me a map. I drove by, couldn't find it, actually walked it. And again, as Mark said, when I talked to him, he said there might be a lot of vegetation around it. So I'm not sure if, and again, this is just for my own education. I just want to get a good understanding of what it is. Take what I found or what I didn't find and try to compare that to definitions for a swale, definitions for a water course, just to get that understanding. Maybe we need a good amount of rainfall to be able to find it, but I couldn't find it, to be honest with you. Has anyone else had a chance to walk it, or?
I can see it because I know where it was from historic observations when it was raining, and it does look very different now that there's a lawn and that it's been the land has been resculpted. So it's not quite the same as it was in the past.
Okay. And is there an
But it
inlet?
was always subtle.
Okay. Is there an inlet and an outlet? Because I was looking on both sides.
There's a catch basin.
Well, in a way, there's an outlet in the pipe that goes underneath the driveway. That's at 53 Farm Road.
Okay.
That would be the outlet in a sense from that swale.
All right. And
then
and
the
again,
pipe
with
is uphill.
not being able to find it, I'm not sure how much the Concom has had a chance to take a closer look at it and get a good understanding of it as well.
Right, and for them, they're looking for habitat as well, for wetland species and aquatic species and other things that contribute to surface waters and wetlands.
Steve, just for the record, the
Rivers.
Concom reviewed this area in great detail because the issue was raised by the neighbors 2.5 or 3 years ago. Concom looked at it, they discussed it at length, and they determined there was nothing there. The town hired an engineering firm called ACOM. They came and looked at it and said, there is nothing here. The conservation agent, Joyce Hastings, came out and looked at it and said, there's nothing here. This has been reviewed. I know you're new, and so you wouldn't be aware of any of this. This has been gone over in just incredible detail because, frankly, the neighbors don't want to see 4 homes developed on 14 acres of land. And they have been loud, and they have come to every meeting, and they say their piece, and they've gotten a chance to say all of those things to Concom. Concom reviewed it. Concom, this whole thing has taken so long that the NOI expired after 3 years. Concom reviewed it again and just issued an NOI saying that the lines are the lines, the resources are the resources. Concom just issued that for the lot next door, lot 4. They issued an NOI a week or 2 ago. And this is not a resource. That's a very clear issue. And I don't think, frankly, I don't think that's in dispute. And like I said, I apologize, you're new to all of this. There is just 3 years of history and, countless hours of meetings on this topic. And to be honest, I thought it was resolved and was going to move through at this point. And the fact that it's coming back up is just breathtaking to me. Not, breathtaking because it's been reviewed and everybody understands it. And the people who are engineers in town will tell you. Sean Colleen is on the call. He'll tell you. Jeremy Marcette, the town administrator, is an engineer. Eric Johnson told us 2 weeks ago, there's no there. And, and this board made that determination a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. I don't know the exact dates, but they made a determination that this was not an open surface drain. And they approved the house to be built at 53 Farm Road. And I'm coming and I'm looking for the same approvals. And, I don't, obviously I'm frustrated and I apologize, Steve. But you can imagine it's been a long road, and I'm trying to now get something done that I thought honestly was a compromise that people would welcome instead of the 32 home 40B. I thought people would welcome having single family homes instead. And it turns out what the neighbors want is for the 14 acres of land that I own to be a park. They want it to be undevelopable, and they're going to do everything they can to make it so. And if they can't make it so, they're going to do everything they can to delay it. And
Okay,
you know,
I don't know that we want interpretation from you, Bob, on what other people are thinking. I think that's outside of what the Board of Health is supposed to be doing. So, all right, I see Arthur, you have your hand. Oh, Steve, did you have any other comments or questions before we move on to?
I'm good. Thank you.
thanks, Steve.
Okay. Art.
Hi, Arthur Fenno, 58 Farm Road, across the street, abutter to all these properties. So just for purposes of the chat, that I really meant, I'm a lawyer among other hats, and generally speaking, when an issue is appealed, it's not considered to be final. And so just, I guess I'm asking the board to be mindful that that issue is still up in the air. Once there's a final appeal and there's a determination, then it's final. I think the board's aware that there is an open issue, I suppose, as to whatever the Conservation Commission has decided. But that was just sort of like background, like, FYI, it's the Conservation Commission made its determination, but when it's under appeal, it's as if that determination doesn't have legal substance until it's finally resolved on appeal. So that was just the comment there. That's not a matter of fact. That's just sort of a general law kind of for background. In terms of the open surface drain or swale or whatever it is, I'm not a hydrologist, hydrogeologist, whatever it is that would be an expert in this. And I would respectfully request that the board expressly consider or perhaps read into the record the letter that was submitted by Brian and Mary Moore, which does speak to this, and they're much more experts both on the Board of Health regulations, the Conservation Commission regulations, all the procedural matters that have gone into this, and that issue sort of generally. They've been much more, they follow that much more closely than I have, and I think their comments, I would like those to be acknowledged expressly, and Julie, I recognize that you did that by way of reference, but if they can be read into the record or if just be considered sort of expressly by the board in determining this. And then in terms of the drain itself, all I can say from being a neighbor across the street and seeing the water flood down the street when the drain was closed, and whereas for over a decade when I lived here, there was no water running down the street when the drain, I guess, was open, if I'm using the correct terminology. All I can say is that there has been some difference of opinion as to whether this drain is open or closed, whether it was considered open or closed when 53 Farm Road was under consideration, and its current status now. I bought my house with my family over a decade ago, and there were never any issues of flooding on the street. And then when the applicant bought 55 Farm Road and threatened the town, as I understand it, with litigation, if they didn't close the drain, if that's the right terminology, then all of a sudden there was flooding on the street. And I believe there is still that. And so whether the drain is open or closed, I've had some discussions with the town and its officials. I can't say, but I'm putting it out there that there may have been an understanding of this drain and its status when 53 Farm Road was under consideration that is not the same as it is now. I don't know that. I would defer to the Moores, who followed this much more closely and have more expertise in this, but just putting that out there for the board's consideration. And then also, since we went a little bit further afield, I would caution anybody for saying that the appeal was frivolous. That is that's a very serious accusation, which carries some legal significance that borders on slander. So I would want to caution somebody for throwing around a word as that has serious implications like frivolous.
Well, let me then correct
hold
the
on.
record
Yeah,
and say,
Bob,
let me
Bob,
just
you're
correct
supposed
the
to go through
record
the
and
board.
say to
You're
Mr.
supposed to go
Fenno,
through
it
the
is
board.
my opinion that the appeal
You
is
are
frivolous.
supposed
That
to
is
go
my
through the
opinion,
board.
and I
I
am
wanted to
entitled
make
to
some
have it.
comments.
You're entitled to your opinion, Bob, but in an open
Thank
meeting,
you.
you have to raise your hand and be acknowledged.
Yeah, saying that it's frivolous
First
and
one.
then correcting it and saying that's your opinion, those are two different things. So when you say something as a factual assertion that it's frivolous, that's a different matter. So I'm just.
It appears you're threatening me with litigation in a
Bob, I'm not
public
going to sue you
meeting.
for slander.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, be careful what you say.
Okay.
Threatening is
Like,
not
words
count.
good,
All right.
Arthur. Threatening
All
is
right.
not.
Hold
Gentlemen,
on,
we're
hold
going
on.
to stop.
Both of you. Yes, thank you. Okay.
Thank you for your
Now,
comments.
there were some points I wanted to make that I've completely forgotten for the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do.
Some of the information,
Do you want me to just, we did
yes,
receive.
if you have something, I'll try to recall what I
I
wanted to say.
I will jog your memory. How's that, Gerald? Maybe. We should
Perfect.
acknowledge that an abutter, Brian Moore of, I believe he's 49. I'm sorry if I don't have his. An abutter, Brian Moore, did send us an email as of today, at 2:30 today, and is not able to be here and asked that we acknowledge his letter and make sure it's recorded for the record. I think it's a fairly lengthy letter, and I don't think we need to necessarily read it in detail, but he made comments relative to the open drain issue. He's the one who brought to light the appeal of negative determination. He also raised the issue of the restriction on the subdivision of this land. And just to comment on that, my understanding is that any determination on that would supersede any permit that we would potentially issue. And so if that happened and it was determined that these parcels could not be subdivided, then that would supersede our permits. Number 4, he also wanted to note, hang on, don't have my glasses, give me a second. He wants to note that segmentation issue was what he was addressing, specifically in relation to lot 4. And again, lot 4 might be before the Conservation Commission, but that is not before this board. We do not have a well or septic application for that lot. Am I correct about that, Jessica and Mark?
You are not correct. You do have a septic and well application, Julie.
Okay.
It's recent.
Okay. So then that must have been very recently filed.
It was recent.
It was
Friday. It was on Friday last week.
Okay, so at the time that we reviewed this 2 weeks ago, we hadn't had it. And so in the interim, we have received that. So again, it has not been reviewed by this board. And then he wanted to acknowledge our new update to a definition of a project, a regulatory update to a definition of project, and what triggers an environmental health impact review, and EHIR. And I think that is the substance. We can, if Daryl, is it typical that we put this in the documents, a letter, if we don't read it in detail and an abutter is not here to speak?
Yeah.
Do we put it in our?
Well, it's in documents connected with the meeting when
Yeah,
it's
it's
noted.
part of the
Something
supplement.
that was input in. Was it distributed to the whole board? I didn't.
Yes, it was.
Okay. All right. So.
I think it
So then
actually.
the board would have had access to it in the documents preparatory to this meeting. And just a couple other things I want to mention, just to illuminate and clarify. So for what falls under Conservation Commission's jurisdiction can differ from what the surface drain is. So just so people understand why it was not an issue for Conservation Commission, is it doesn't serve, again, as a habitat of sorts. The extreme of this sort of drain would be the kinds of things that you see in California, the giant concrete culverts that are there for kind of flash flooding that can occur out there. So again, not an animal habitat necessarily, maybe some things naturalize a little. In any case, so the objective is different, but what we learned from Mass DEP in the past is that they were focused on things that the Conservation Commission had concerns about. So that's where you can draw it. So that's why interpretations can be different. It is still essentially functioning as something that is moving water from one place to another. And then it becomes more like stormwater management, which again is not always dealing with the habitat side of things. It deals with water shedding across roads. And we do have regulations in our in Board of Health that looks at projects above a certain threshold should not alter either the run on or the run off of water onto a project property by plus or minus 10%. So that is part of the regulations too. So. All right. Let's see. So Deshang, and we're running quite late, and we still have a lot of topics. So if you can be concise in what you want to say, and new information only.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you, Carol. So I just want to make in a couple. One is the facts clarification. So as an investigation engineer and a wetland scientist, so that pipe during the review of lot 2 of 53 Farm Road had a water flowing out intermittently. What I call intermittent means they are not continuously flowing water. Only when you receive a significant rain, then that rain goes to that catch basin, and that catch basin discharges water into an area with significant low groundwater. So the groundwater there is like 4 or 5 feet deep. So it just doesn't meet any water course. The water course in this open drain was putting in the same category for impact. So therefore, it is for the board to consider in the wetlands protection or in your own regulation. There's no place clearly defined this open drain, but water course and all other wetlands is part of water-related resource protection. So it's clearly defined in the Wetlands Protection Act and the regulations, but not in anywhere else with this open drain. So which will equivalent to a water course protection that requires 125 feet setback from septic system. So that's the two things I want to just make it clear. So the water does flowing out during the review of the lot 2. So it's not like in a recent new thing. I have been there many times in the summer of 2021, and with the conservation's review in that process. So I did see water coming out of there, but they just recharge into the ground. They are not making a continuous flow there. So that's the two things I just want to make sure during our design of that project, we are clearly understand and agreed by both the board and the conservation and the DEP. So I think right now, I was surprised to making the open surface drain as a totally different category, equivalent to a wetlands or to a water course, require 125 feet. So I never can understand, and I never can find any regulatory or factual support from any of the existing regulations or laws I have reviewed. Thank you.
Okay.
I found a
So
note.
Mark,
I'm sorry. I was going to Mr. Fenno had asked a question and I had found the answer to his question in my note, and I was just going to put that again in the record, which is
Okay,
the pipe that we're discussing that discharges onto 55 Farm was plugged by DPW in May of 2022. So the permit for Lot 2 was conditionally approved in November of 2021. The pipe was then plugged in May 2022, and then it was then unplugged in around like October, November time of 2023. And that is the current status, is it is unplugged. And so I think we reviewed that in the previous meeting, but I think it's confusing. It's a confusing timeline and it's worth saying it again. I'm sorry, Daryl, go ahead.
okay. So Mark, in terms of Title V compliance, although we're not looking at only Title V,
No.
in terms of septic system compliance,
Yes.
is this the key outstanding issue that we need to resolve? And then maybe we have some things that, like other plans that we've had, that we'd want at some point confirmation of the legal lot lines, although we
Right.
recognize that may come later. So we have addressed that before. Is there anything else in particular?
Well, as you said, the legal boundaries, which are part of the process that the applicant has gone through before on Greenwood Street in respect to
Yep.
going through the planning board at that time, the approval through planning and the legal boundaries are resolved. So in the past, we have withheld the plans for distribution until that has been completed and addressed on the septic plan is now having legal boundary lines. The other one I mentioned was the garbage grinder. The garbage grinder
Mhm.
waiver, deed recording would be required also prior to the plans being released. And the major one we're discussing tonight is the distance to that pipe and to determine if the pipe is considered a open surface drain or not. And last but not least, the new discussion that came up tonight was we always require conservation approval before the board will finalize their approval, and that's in question. That's the way I summarized it. I summarize it from what's been discussed and what's been discussed in the past.
Mhm.
That was a
Okay.
lot. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So, board, are we ready to vote on the open surface drain? You feel we've had enough information to move ahead? Julie?
Are you, when you say vote, Daryl, are you going to make a motion specific to the drain, or are you referring to the plan? I'm trying to follow your thought.
No, I think we need to resolve the open surface drain issue to move ahead. And I'd love if someone else would like to articulate a motion.
I hear my name being called. Okay. So I didn't draft a motion for that because I didn't realize we were going to make any type of motion to resolve that.
Or it could be people don't feel ready, but I've been counting the days, and I think our next meeting is right up against the 45, assuming that September 23rd is the start. So I feel more comfortable addressing some of it, but I also realize that we have not heard back from town council on if there's anything we need to condition or prep.
Just for the
Or
record,
alert.
Daryl, the plans were
Yeah.
submitted September 28th. So by October 31st, that would be 33 days, giving you another 12 days for the 45 days to be up. So yeah, you are getting
So
close in
November-
November, but you have a little time.
November 6th.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it gives you a little
Okay.
wiggle room, but
Yeah.
not a lot. That is correct.
Yes. Okay.
Daryl, may I suggest?
Then are people comfortable moving ahead with that today or still need time to digest?
So are we moving forward with answering the question as to whether we're considering the pipe a open surface drain?
Well,
Yeah.
okay, again, the swale, the pipe is not an open surface drain because it's a pipe. It's round, covered, considered covered, mostly buried. So it's the what's downstream of the pipe, down gradient of the pipe.
Darrell, I want to stand corrected. The plans were received September 26th of this past month, just so I can stand corrected. I said September 28th in error. Thank you.
Okay. And Jessica, does that match your records?
Yes, thanks, Mark. I was going to correct that. It was September 26th.
Okay.
Daryl,
All
I
right,
think
so back to the,
I think the I think maybe an easier black and white way to just, rather than a motion, can we get a sense of the board? If you're comfortable with that, whether or not
sure.
this drainage swale meets meets the definition, not definition, I don't want to say it. Whether this, give me a second to work it out. I'm trying to put, I didn't expect we were going to do it this way. That this drainage swale is not applicable under our regulations for 125-foot setback, as it is not a water course within the Conservation Commission jurisdiction. Well, let's take out that last part. Whether or not this this basically triggers our regulations as it stands. And my opinion would be consistent with what the board had acted on in 2021. This does not reach that regulatory threshold.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Steve, we're going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that. I know when we were talking about it earlier, what came to mind is whether or not Concom has any kind of a document, any kind of a report that they put together that maybe we could look at. I'm not sure if that took place or if it's just in the minutes of the meeting, but I think given what you're just saying, I think I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Right, and that there, I don't believe there is that kind of a report from them on that, because again, it didn't have wetland soils nor wetland vegetation.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, there might have been more, but that's one part I recall. Okay, so the other question is, in terms of getting things laid out on how we approach, again, approving something that's before us, if given the other information that we've received, recognizing that there are no guarantees that a full project would be built out, that if the plans that have been suggested do get built out, then I feel it's part of our obligation is to alert the applicant to then what requirements will be triggered down the line, and then how they may impact this. You know, would this change anything about this project, individual piece project? And that's what we don't have good enough guidance for yet. That means that it's critical that we hold our next meeting, or if something comes up for people that would make it difficult to attend on November 6th, then we'd need to pick a date before November 6th to have a meeting to alert you as to what the options are. Does that sound doable, as to have this at the next meeting to wrap up some of these issues as best we can?
And so, Daryl, just to reiterate, we're looking at a conditional approval of the well and septic plan, conditional to the legal boundaries being set by the planning board, the garbage grinder deed restriction, with a recognition that until the resolution of the appeal to the Conservation Commission's negative determination is finalized, that the applicant would move forward at their own risk. And that's not really I guess it's a condition. And then the
It's
fourth,
a formal acknowledgement that we understand, and we want them to be aware that they are pursuing things at their own risk.
and then the fourth that you're potentially thinking about is if we need to include anything, if this becomes part of a larger project. If we need to include anything in that portion, that's your train of thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I can just add, I may have confused the planning board side of this. They will approve the plot, the actual lot, but the legal boundaries are set by a surveyor in most cases, brought to the planning board for their review and approval. I believe that's the actual process that occurs. They don't actually approve or set the legal boundaries. They approve the legal boundaries as set by a land surveyor in most cases.
And it sounds like I said the word set instead of approve, which is what, okay, thank you. I did not mean to say set, but I'm glad that you caught me on that one. Thank you, Mark. So approval of the legal boundaries by the planning board. And
Julie, the language should be endorsed because this is called approval not required lot. So means it's endorsed by planning board, not approved. So that's the correct term.
because this is being done under A&R.
Correct. It's an approval not required, otherwise it would be oxymoron with it.
Okay.
Right, we just
So
need the
endorsement
plans
of
to be
boundaries.
confirmed that they are the actual lot lines and therefore, and whether they change from what the plans that we have before us now. Obviously, measurements, setbacks have been calculated against the lines as currently presented. So if they get adjusted in the finalization, then that's what's important to the Board of Health.
So Daryl,
Okay.
for the open surface drain, do you think we should just leave this as the sense of the board, or do you think, since this was a thorough topic of discussion, should we actually have a vote so that we have that on the record, or what is I mean, so we do not re-adjudicate this again, is what I'm trying to make sure we don't end up doing.
Yeah. Would people like to button this up this evening? Or do it all at once at the next meeting? I'm flexible.
Or to close part of it, you know.
With the motion. All right, now we have to craft that.
So Julie, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused about where you all are right now relative to a vote on my project. Could you, I'm sorry, it's been a long night for all of us. Could you just walk me through what you're voting on, so it's clear on the record? Because Daryl just mentioned something about the next meeting, and I'm not clear on what that's about.
So what we're discussing, Bob, what would be the conditions of approval for the well and septic, of which we have gotten a sense of the board on how we would treat what's been previously described as the open surface drain. Given it's been a topic of lengthy discussion and back and forth, that we're wondering if we should make this a motion and formal vote to put it in the record rather than just a sense of the board to resolve that issue for future discussions and meetings. And
Sure, yeah.
so there's that. And then in the other bucket, we're talking about what would be the conditions of approval of which we said legal boundaries endorsed by the planning board, the garbage grinder deed restriction, an acknowledgement that until there is a resolution of the appeal of the Conservation Commission's negative determination, you would move forward at your own risk. And then
But I am able to move forward. It's just, I acknowledge. It's at
acknowledging
my
it's your
own
risk.
I understand. Okay, yeah.
And then the fourth is the one that we are discussing related to the, if this becomes part of a project that in the future would trigger our EHIR. That is the part that we are discussing now. And we would be holding off on a vote until we have received our legal counsel on how to address that.
Okay. Can I just now circle back to what you and I spoke about very early on and read to you the title of your section 3? Because I think it's relevant to the board and I think the board should hear it. Would that be all right?
In the regulation?
Yeah.
I guess I'd be interested to hear what you think is something hidden in there.
It's not hidden. It's the title of section 3 in your regulations. It is regulation, and I quote, Regulation 3, Public and Environmental Health Review Regulations and Standards for selected site development activities or other special conditions or for other than a single family dwelling on a single lot. Clearly, the title says that it doesn't apply to Lot 3 Farm Road, which is a single family lot. It says
But
it's
then
for.
if you read section 5.3, I think it is, definition of project. This may be one part of a larger project when looked at its entirety. And so that gets covered by that definition.
But it clearly says in the title that it is not applicable, quote, for other than a single family dwelling on a single lot. It's clear when this was written, it was intended not to catch up A&R lots. And in fact, there's a history, Julie, with this board. When the board approved a similar situation on Green Lane, going back about 7-8 years ago, this regulation 3, you've changed it a little bit, but for the most part, the same regulation was in place. Green Lane developed, I believe it was 5 single-family homes on A&R lots, all abutting each other. They did not go through this process. The same thing happened in a subdivision on Nason Hill, where you had a series of A&R lots next to each other. They were not subjected to section 3 of your code. That is the precedent. And
except they were not, they're just different arrangements. This is what we've been advised in the past by town council and by others, that this could potentially apply and that there is a gray area, but it's a possibility that it will trip the thresholds given the common driveway and some other things in different. So there are other factors and we don't know where it's going to go and we just want to get our information.
I will also point out to the board that September 26th is not the date that you receive this application, because September 26th is the day when I delivered 5 hard copies, which Mark said, until I delivered 5 hard copies to you, that you didn't have a complete application. I went to your regulations. Your regulations don't say that. Your regulations say that 5 hard copies are required at the issuance of the permit, not at the point of application. So the September 26th date is incorrect. And I think you have a timeline problem here. And I'm asking for you to finish the job tonight. or not. But with regard to section 3, you have a standing precedent on 2 different occasions in the last decade where this was not applied for that purpose. And it's exactly the same situation. And in addition to that, it says for other than a single family dwelling on a single lot, which is what this is.
What this is at the moment.
And the reason for it is because when you have a whole lot and a house, you're meeting all of the individual regulatory requirements. This section 3 is for when you have a bunch of houses on a single property and you're not dealing with separating out all the 4 or 5 bedroom septic systems. That's why this is there. And that's why it says for other than a single family home on a single family lot. Because it didn't want, when it was written, whoever wrote this, didn't want it to apply to single family homes on single family lots. And that's why it was not applied on Green Lane. And it's why it was not applied on Knollcrest. And I'm asking this board to read your own regulation title and to consider your precedent boards who did not apply this to this situation. I understand that there are folks who would like you to apply this. You know, there are neighbors who want you to apply this. We had this conversation ad infinitum 2.5 years ago, and the same arguments were made.
A critical change that has been updated, at least is we went from, it was a little over 4,000 gallons per day to 2,000 gallons per day.
No, that's not correct. It was always 2,000, Julie.
I believe
No,
it used to
No,
be.
the reason I know that, Julie, is because when I did Abbey Road, I was 2,700 gallons. And I did an EHIR for Abbey Road because the cutoff was 2,000 gallons.
But that was a change prior to that. It had been higher in the past. In
Yeah,
any
I-
case, so Jessica, your records of tracking when this project started. You mentioned the 26th. Bob has a difference of opinion. Do you have a date in mind, Bob, of when you think? And
Yeah, if you give me
Jessica
just a
can
second,
check her
if
records.
if you give me just a second, I can find it. It'll take me just a minute to look through.
With the September 12th or around that time.
Well, on September 20th, I wrote to Mark and said, please see attached the following for Lot 3 Farm Road updated plan set. So it appears September 20th. There were some revisions made and so the date would be September 20th. And by the way, Concom voted their approval on September 5th.
That's September 11th, but probably took a little time waiting for their decision.
Yes, September, hold on, I can tell you when Concom voted. I believe it was September 5th. Because I
It
actually
was
started-
September 5th, as
It
per my
was.
spreadsheet,
Yeah,
correct?
correct. So therefore, I think September 20th would be the date.
So why don't we, I guess there's two ways we could do this. We can either make a motion and see if it gets a second. Or we can get a sense from everyone if they want to wait to potentially add a condition related to the segmentation issue, the project issue.
Or question, Julie, doesn't Bob have another house in the works? So we could address it then also. I mean, Daryl, I
Well, you have Diana, you're right. You have an application for an additional single-family home in your pipeline. That's correct. You have two.
And that's what I just learned today, Diana, I did not know that for lot 4 that we had received an application. And
That was delivered to, by the way,
Received on
Julie,
Friday.
Julie, I made a mistake. When I said it was delivered to you on Friday, it was delivered to you a week ago Wednesday. A week ago today, excuse me.
Okay.
I just forwarded it to email to you, by email to you.
I know that Jessica tracks that for us.
Great.
Okay, so I do think that would be, given that we have kind of, when I look at the thresholds that have to be crossed for EHIR, this project in conjunction with what was lot 2, 53 Farm, doesn't trigger those.
No.
I think at a certain point, we do reach that trigger point, and what do we do then? I think that's the part that I'm most interested in hearing legal counsel on. And so I think I would be comfortable moving forward with a conditional approval tonight. And I can go ahead and make a motion and see if it gets a second, but
no, I would be comfortable too. 'Cause
Okay.
we're yeah.
I'm concerned about our timeline.
Yeah.
I am concerned about our timeline. And for anyone listening, we have a certain amount of time in which we need to be reviewing and addressing submissions to us, and that's why we keep talking about dates. So I guess I hope people will make friendly amendments, because I'm not great at these. So I would move to conditionally approve lot 3. This is 65 Farm Road. Conditional to the legal boundaries being endorsed by the planning board. The receipt of a garbage grinder deed restriction. And I guess, how do we want to put this?
There was what an
Notice.
acknowledged-
Notice to the, and this would be notice, an acknowledgement that until there is a resolution of the appeal to the Conservation Commission's negative determination, that the applicant would move forward at their own risk.
And I'm willing to acknowledge that right now on video. So there you are.
They also want it in writing.
I'll put it in an email to you.
Did I miss any of them? Okay, that's my motion.
And I will second that.
Discussion. Oh. Approve, in that approval, is it implicit about then the open surface drain?
There is that assumption.
I mean, I would argue you're approving it because, I mean, you're saying it's
With it.
compliant because you're approving it.
Yes. Yeah.
The board comfortable with that, though? That is one interpretation, but is that board okay with that?
Is our meeting minutes a public record? Enough clarity on this? Can we, Jeremy,
I believe,
can I ask Jeremy, would it be helpful to the town if we made a formal motion separate from this motion relative to the open surface drain, or is our discussion and meeting minutes enough of a record? What would be the most useful moving forward?
I believe the latter would be fine. If the Board of Health determined they're approving this, not considering that as an open service drain, that would suffice for us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and it sounds like, well, I don't know if we have any more discussion.
okay. No further discussion. Last chance. All right. Hearing none, we're ready to vote.
Steve, can you lead us?
Sure. Steve Constantine, aye, with the conditions stated as part of the record.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Onward. We have 34 Brush Hill Road. While Bob and DeShang are here.
Sorry, I missed
Mark.
something.
Hang on, Bob.
Did the-
Bob, hang
did
on.
the
I
vote-
will ask, Bob, I will ask her the question. Thank you. Daryl, I'm not sure if you were muted, but I don't believe, Jessica, were you able to record Daryl's vote on that motion?
No, I was not.
I'm sorry, Daryl, could you just repeat your vote?
Aye. Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Sorry. Hope you heard the other things I was saying all along, or maybe not. I was not muted, so I don't know what that was.
And just before we move from Farm Road, may I ask a question?
Go
Sure.
ahead.
Given this conversation about an EHIR, can the board appoint two of you to sit down with me and with perhaps your counsel and Jeremy, and we can have a conversation about this? Obviously, it ultimately needs to come back to the board. We all understand that. That's the process. But it is impossible to have these conversations in these meetings. It doesn't work. And so I would ask that the board appoint two of you to have the conversations and try to get this figured out, because it's just, you know, again, that's another conversation that we've been having for 2.5 years. It needs to be resolved. And that would be my ask.
I don't think I don't think there's been one conversation. We have discussed the topic of EHIRs often. And we would prefer it for these larger projects, but some of your other projects, right, have been 20 gallons under. So it has not been applied. And I think we've talked about it a number of times, and we don't have new information yet to discuss. I don't think, not until we talk to council. Maybe not even then.
So are you telling me that I need to go and design systems and bring them to you, and then you'll tell me what the process looks like? I can't abide by that. I need to understand. We need to get on the same page about what your requirements are or not, because I can't go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars designing systems, not understanding your process. That's not fair to me. That's not fair to anyone.
I'm saying that we're not ready with any new information other than what we have discussed in the past. That's what we're trying to find out, is the next steps about how we deal with the threshold being tripped.
But I guess what I'm saying, Daryl, is how do we find that out? You've had this rule on the books for decades, and it was not applied to A&R lots previously. And now you're saying, well, we're not sure if it applies to A&R lots or not. And I just need to, I need to know. I'm an
The
applicant.
difference here, from what we understand, is that if you're going to have a common driveway, that could make it a project that's different than houses along Green Road, Green Lane. That's a difference. Shared services, like a shared septic, that could also be something that would trigger it.
I will point out there's nothing about common driveways in your regulations related to whether Section 3 applies or not. That's making it up. There's nothing in your regulations. You can search on the word
project
common.
definition, it refers to that issue. Project 5.3. Let's circle back. We still have much other work to do. We're not averse to talking to you. I just don't think I'm ready to schedule something now because I don't have anything more to add that would be concrete.
I think I understand what the question is, which is simply after we have sought legal counsel and have a better understanding of our interpretation, you would like to be able to meet and understand what that is.
I think that's fair, yeah.
Yes, and then I think we would bring that information back also to a public meeting to disclose that in a public meeting as well.
Of course.
And allow
We'd
conversation.
want to share it with the entire board and with you and with anybody else interested, but I don't see a reason
But
to
this regulation
do
has
that
been in,
offline.
this regulation has been in place for decades, and you can't tell me how it's a fundamental question of how it's applied. You can't tell me. That just seems
Because we haven't had the idea of sequencing that we could control in the past. It just, that was not part of it at the time.
But Green Lane and
So
Knollcrest were not sequenced.
they were subdivisions, so.
No, they weren't. They were A&R lots.
Knollcrest was a subdivision.
I'm afraid I do not know the background in any of those.
Green Lane was not a subdivision.
All right.
I could be thinking of
No,
Mason
it wasn't.
Hill,
It
but
was a series
there are
of
multiple
lots along a public road.
All right, in the interest of time.
We're
we
not
need
going to
move on.
debate it. Could we please take this up at another time? We have other work that we haven't even touched yet, and it's already 9 o'clock.
So Bob, we will circle
So-
back, let you know what we learned with our legal counsel, and then we will also discuss that in a public meeting once we have the information.
I'm
Yes.
grateful.
Daryl, where would you like to go next with our agenda?
34 Brush Hill Road, Wall Bob and Deshang are present.
Thank you.
So Mark, would you like to give an intro to where we are?
Sure, and there's been correspondence that the board has seen up till today. And at 34 Brush Hill Road, there's still some unresolved issues, and I would like to note those to the board. The main thing here is that I think the majority of the review can be resolved. I think, most of the information I need is, I believe, easy to place in the plan, just so the board knows Deshang is not the engineer representing this plan. It was done by DGT Associates. Bert Corey is the engineer of record, but I don't know, Deshang did the soil testing, so he definitely has had some review in this process and started the process, I believe, too. The first question would be the actual, if you want to put the septic plan up, if you have it available, I can show you the soil testing that's been done.
Okay.
And how the septic system leaching area, soil absorption area has been being set up.
It's coming.
That's okay. It's another one of those plans where the hard copy shows up after the electronic copy. So date-wise, the hard copy showed up on September 30th. And I basically I don't know if, Jessica, you have the actual application when the actual septic plan came in, but
Yep, let me just
We
refer
can just
back
get
to the
that.
spreadsheet. I will circle back in a moment.
oh, that's fine.
It's 3 weeks ago, Jessica, approximately.
The hard part is without a hard copy, it's not as easy to review and that makes it difficult, but
But you didn't ask me for a hard copy for 2 weeks.
I can check that record, Bob. I'm not here to do that.
Bob,
Again, go through the chair, please. I would
Bob, we
appreciate
need
that.
to be, please, moving forward, it is 9 o'clock. We are only a fraction of the way through our agenda. Moving forward, please raise your hand. We will acknowledge you. You are the applicant for the project we are discussing. We will absolutely acknowledge you, but we need to be able to have the plan presented so we can discuss it and move forward. I do not want to be here till 11 o'clock.
And so there's some deep holes and perks that were done prior to the resubmittal and the relocation, shifting, I'll say, of the soil absorption area. We had a perk at 47 minutes per inch, 2311, which was not shown on this updated revised septic plan, but it's close to trench 7. And then you have also a 67-minute per inch rate, which is close to trench number 1. And then additional testing was done, but in between those tests are these relocated trenches that we're not for sure what the soil percolation rate would be, and additional testing, in my view, is needed to make sure. It was noted out in the field that wherever they started the good testing, or if that's what they wish to use, that's where the system would start. And that was not what was submitted back to our department. So that needs to be reviewed and discussed. The other areas, we have the plans for the proposed units, and that was submitted on the land planning site. And we also need to discuss, we had a report submitted to the land planning, which in my view needs to be addressed, and that's groundwater mounding. Again, there's some discussion on the legal process involved with that, and I know the board will probably need to review that with legal counsel. Also, some additional notes. Conservation Commission, I'm not for sure if they've had a chance to review and finalize this septic proposal. Deed recordings will be needed for the garbage grinder, the room count, which is being requested, as well as the annual maintenance, which is noted on the plan, but will be finalized in further recordings. So those are the major highlights. There were some other highlights and deficiencies that we were going back and forth on the status of those. And so the most recent email in response to the applicant was submitted or sent out this afternoon. But there's the plan. If you look at the soil test if you're looking at the soil absorption area, if you look to the left on the upper left side, that is depot and perk test 2311. And I'm sorry, Dara, I was looking at the plan, but you're getting on the upper right-hand side of the field.
Oh, upper right hand.
I wish you're there. And the perk test, according to my records, was to the left of that box, that checkered box. You see, that's a depot. That's 2311. Perk test is to the left of that. And trench number 7 is close to that perk test. And then they did additional testing, but in that area on the upper right side of the plot plan, it's unknown if trench number 7 is going to be in the material they're addressing as being 39 minutes per inch, which is more to the center of the system. If you go to the lower left side of the plan of the leaching field, over to the, I'm sorry, lower right, I'm sorry, Darryl. Lower right, that is, excuse me, that is perk number 2-1. Right where you see that 2-1, that was at 67 minutes per inch. And trench number 1 is very close to that as well. So in my view, we need to go out and do additional soil testing based on the fact that we're not for sure what's in between the other tests that were done to move the system more to the left. So that would be my, that has been my note to the applicant, that additional soil testing is needed. I wanted the board to see why that conclusion was made. And I'd be glad to answer any questions of the board. And if the board wishes to recognize others, I'll be glad to answer anything I can that's available to me at this point.
Okay, so Mark, it sounds to me that if this is 67, which is exceeds the allowable perk rate for Title V, really, given the distance here,
yes,
and the amount of system, we don't know if there's a transition point to an acceptable perk rate, where that is. Okay.
I'm correct, and I'm sorry. Yes, that is correct.
And is that an issue in more than one area? Like,
well,
okay, so it sounds like it's an issue down here.
Trench number 1, which is at the edge there, the first trench there. Let me make sure I'm getting the trench numbers right. They're in small numbers, but that would be trench number 1. But these 2 outer trenches definitely, there's a question of what those soils are in that location.
Yeah.
One is trench 7 on one side, the other one's trench 1 on the other side of this split system that are close to these deep holes. And that's correct. With the transition, the discussion was start the system where you know the good tests are and go the other direction, but they did not do that. And it was not presented that way, as you can see from the plot plan.
All right, do other people follow the logic?
Yeah, and I think this is, you know, the nature of a site with a glacial till like this. It's just so highly variable that it's difficult.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have any comments or questions?
So how many more perk tests are going to be required?
Well, they should at least do, if you look at the length of this system, I would suggest 4 perks along trench 1 and 7, and see what those rates are. And deep hole wise, they can do 1 on each side of it, but at least do 4 perks. That's a very lengthy system. And by doing a perk every, say, 20 feet along trench 1 and 7 would give us an indication if the transitioning has occurred to what they're designing at, and that's a 39 minute per inch rate, which is further near the other trenches,
Okay.
And sometimes in the field, you make another determination based on what you're finding. You know, it's unfortunate that sometimes you don't always, but at least I would say minimal trench 1, which is the lower side, you don't have much testing in between that 67 minute per inch rate next to trench 1 and the others. The other side, at least the upper side, where you had the 47 minute per inch rate. So maybe 3 to 4 perk test to make sure we have a conclusive decision and review of the soil types that are going to be underneath the septic system or in the septic system area, leaching area.
So there's 2 issues. One is that is the allowable perk rate been exceeded, and then also then what are the perk rates across the system that might affect the sizing for the field. Okay. All right, Bob?
One of the things I find difficult in this process, and I'll just ask for the board's indulgence, I assume that we are having a conversation tonight about Title V. I have a Title V application in front of you, and as you all well know, anything else, any of your other thoughts, and you're welcome to have them on the project, need to be directed through the ZBA. Are we all in agreement that that's the process? And that
Yes.
tonight we are discussing simply Title V, okay?
Yes.
And that Mark's review and exchange of emails with me should be focused on Title V. Okay? Mark was just talking about the Conservation Commission not having approved this. Conservation Commission under state law is not, you don't go to the Conservation Commission until the comprehensive permit has been issued. That's the law. And Mark is saying we haven't gone to the Conservation Commission. So I'm really confused. 2/3 of Mark's comments in the email today were not related to Title V regulations. They were related either to nonsense or they were related to local requirements. And I need to have things separate. That's the process here. And so I would like to stay focused on Title V, okay? Now, with regard to, Julie, you were just talking about soil types. So the requirements of Title V are for there to be 2 deep observation holes and a minimum, and it does say minimum, of 1 percolation test. And, you know, it goes on to say, but if the soils are inconsistent and you're trying to figure out what the soils are, then you might need to do more than 2 deep holes and a single percolation test. And in fact, we went out and we did a bunch of testing. And then we designed a system and Mark came back and he said, I'd like to see you do more testing. So I didn't argue. We got out the machines and we went out several months later and we did the additional testing. So at this point, we have done 8 test holes. And we've done, I think it was 6 or 7 perks, okay? So then what we did is we took the data back and we said, okay, we know Title V requires us to have 2 deep observation holes, but we're gonna wrap the system around 5 evenly distributed holes, that's what Title V, they require 2, but because it's true, it's a big system, we did 5. We have 5 deep holes in this proposed system instead of the minimum of 2, and that's appropriate. And then with regard to perks, yes, we had bad perks uphill. If you look at the topography of the site, the perks at the uphill, I believe it's around an elevation of 218. Those perks were bad. When you went down the hill, the perks got dramatically better. So what did we do? We did more perk tests. We got one that was bad, that perk 2-1, that was bad, that failed. Perk for the hole 2311, and I think the perk is actually missing on there, but Mark's right. The perk hole is near test hole 2311. That one was also, it passed, but it wasn't great. I think it was at 47 minutes. So we said, let's get away from those soils where the perks are much slower, and in one case did fail. So what we did was we took and we moved the system downhill, and we wrapped the system around 5 deep holes and around 5 perks. And then we got perks anywhere from, I've forgotten, high single digits to 39 minutes, as Mark mentioned. So what do we use to design? we used 39 minutes to design. And by the way, we meet the local regulations. 39 minutes meets the local regulations. We're not asking for a waiver on the perk, okay? So, Julie, you talked about soils. Title V says you can have these small number of holes unless your soils are inconsistent. Our soils are completely consistent. They're all sandy loam, and Mark will agree with that. There's no dispute that all of the soil is sandy loam. And so we've got consistent soils, we've got 5 perk tests, and we've got 5 deep holes within our system. How many times? I mean, I've already gone out and tested again on Mark's request, and I did it without argument. It was a reasonable request on Mark's part that we go and we do some additional testing. We did that. We're now working with 5 deep hole tests and 5 perk tests. The perk test, like I said, the slowest one meets even the local regulations. And I just don't understand why we're being asked to go out and test yet a 3rd time. And I am not accepting of that ask this time around. I was accepting the first time around. I mean, how many times we go out and we test and then Mark says, oh no, I want to see it again. And by the way, the practice of this board and the practice of Mark with regard to test holes in the system, I can give you and will, before this is over, give you substantial examples of just this type of thing. This board approved a system on Greenwood for me where a hole that did not meet your local standards was approximately 14 feet away. The hole that doesn't meet the standards here is on the order of 27 feet away from the system. So, you know, this is inconsistent to ask for more testing from your past practices and from what it says in Title V. Thank you.
Jessica, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just had a quick question to clarify. So my records indicate that Concom approval for the subsequent soil testing that was noted on the Form 11 and Form 12 was done. AA approval was given on August 14th, and so the soil testing was done on August 19th. So I just wanted clarity on if there's additional soil testing being asked after the August 19th testing.
Kind of missed the question. Sorry.
So are we
You
asking
mean-
for additional testing, additional soil testing from the August 19th date that we had just tested?
Which was the second testing. I don't
Yes.
remember which. Okay. Second, which frankly turned out to be a benefit. It found better soils were found that allowed the system to be smaller. So the results of that were actually to the benefit of the applicant.
Right. So then I'm just asking for clarity on why why additional testing is being asked for. That's just what I was unclear on.
Because of the that high perk rate close to the system and an uncertainty of where things change along between the other testing and that, there's a significant amount of septic system there, which when you think about how many homes this system represents compared to usually 3 test pits for a single family home, then 5 doesn't seem so great.
So
again,
this is additional
5
testing
wasn't
being
really
requested from
written with big systems in mind, but that's
from what was just
Big
tested on August 19th.
yes. But do you understand the concept of what
Yes, I just
what
wanted.
information is after? And it's not the whole Mark's suggesting perk test, not test holes, which are a different level of effort.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear,
Mark?
Daryl, there were 3 test pits done at Abbey Road, which was a substantially larger system than this one. And I've got 5 in this field, in this proposed field. I've got 5 test pits. Abbey Road was 2,700 gallons. This is about 1,800, 1,700 and something gallons. So for a 1,700 and something gallon system, we have 5 test pits at Abbey
I
Road.
can't comment on that without reviewing the data for that to understand how consistent or inconsistent things were. And I think some of this, the number of holes is reflective of testing in one place wasn't opportune and retesting and finding actually better conditions than found the first time around. So different thing. But anyway, Mark?
Yes, well, one is that the deficiency letter was all Title V, just so the board knows. I would ask the applicant if he feels differently to submit a letter what deficiencies he feels was not Title V. They were all Title V. I made sure when the review was complete, it met that the requirements were being met per Title V, not the local codes. Back to the soil testing, the plan shows it clearly that there are test holes very close to Trench 7 and Trench 1 that were over the 39-minute per inch rate that they were designing this on. So I would just like to reiterate that, and it's so clearly to see when you look at where the test holes are located. So we don't know what type of soils are in the area of Trench 1 and Trench 7, especially the upper side of Trench 7. That's why I'm asking the applicant to apply again, and yes, there might be another Conservation Commission requirement for that. Maybe they'll allow it under their original approval. And going on that, conservation, I said additional notes that will be needed include the deed recording, Conservation Commission. In the deed recordings I mentioned are the garbage grinder deed recordings, the room count, the annual maintenance. That will come later, and I truly understand for the review, Conservation Commission's final approval of this plan isn't needed at the time of our review. So I respect what the applicant said, and I understand it. But again, I just wanted to clear up any misunderstandings. Thank you.
So Daryl, let me address what Mark just said while it's fresh in people's minds. He just said that Trench 7 doesn't have enough information. So Trench 7 has test pit DHTP 2-2 sitting on top of it. How is it that we don't have enough information? I am baffled by that statement.
Darryl, I'll take your lead whenever you want me to respond.
Yeah, if you would like to respond now.
Okay, thank you. So Trench 7, as I noted, the upper area is right near where the 67-minute per inch rate was.
That's not Trench 7.
Oh, that's one then, is it? It's hard to
No.
read because the numbers
No,
are
it's
so small
2.
here.
It's Trench 2.
Okay, and let me put a light on it. These are very small numbers that I almost need a magnifying
It
glass.
would be, I have zoomed in my screen. I'm looking at this separate. I've zoomed it into the maximum that I can.
Oh,
and
don't worry.
I'm having trouble seeing. And even if I had my readers right now, if someone could just walk us through the trench numbers, because I'm struggling to see that.
I can do
Right,
it if you
because
like, Julie. I'd be happy to.
the boundary line kind of cuts off the number. I find it hard
Yeah.
to discern
I-
what
I'm
they
just,
are.
I'm trying to orient, since we're talking about the trenches, I'm thinking up and down gradient, and if someone could.
Sure.
Yeah, if I
So-
may, if I can help with that.
Hang on,
So
give
the
Mark-
upper two trenches that are closer to that red line are the trenches we're talking about. That trench there, and especially the upper area, which was right near the 67-minute per inch rate, and the other trench on the other side of this split system on the right side, that trench. So whatever numbers they are, I apologize. They're so hard to read because they're microscopic.
I'm having trouble. Okay.
I think.
I'd
I
be
think
happy
this-
to explain the numbering system to you all if that would be helpful.
Well, trench one is definitely the one on the lower side to the right. And I thought, but I can check this here. I thought it was trench
1357, maybe, but
Yeah,
again,
so,
this
but if
looks
Bob
like
can
a
help us
2
out,
or
that
a
would
7.
be great. I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
Sure. So Bob, on the left, so we have 2 distribution
So,
fields.
so where your yellow pointer is right now, that is 2. That's 2.
okay, and this
That's
is 1.
1.
Okay. Thank
So I
you.
think you get the pattern, right?
One and two. I apologize. 1 and 2. The upper side of 2.
Okay,
and the
so let me
side-
address,
I suggest you go through the board again, the chair, Bob, as I did.
as I said, trench 2.
Mark, are you finished with your comment that you wanted to make in response?
Again, I stand, as I noted, that testing is limited in the areas of trench 1 and 2. I stand corrected that it's trench 2, not trench 7. So that's, you can see it, it's clear there, and the real higher perks were right next to those trenches. So in between the good test and the bad test. Again, in the center, yeah, you did have a group of testing on that end of the trench 2, but not on the upper side where the 67-minute per inch rate was. That's all. It's clear as
It-
Okay, so I think so Mark's recommendation is for 3 to 4 additional perks. And
And
that
that's unacceptable.
And that
Sure.
is based on, yes, we've acknowledged that that is your stance, Bob. And that is based on the high variability of the perk rates. And again, looking at the plans, those done in August of this past year ranged from 3 to 39, which is a range of perk rates that we do not typically see. And given the size of the system, what we're looking for is evidence of consistency of the perk rate that's being designed to is the same throughout, or no, does not exceed what it's being designed to throughout the entire SAS. Mark, did I capture that correctly?
Yes, you did, and a very good point. The soils are variable. And as the applicant noted, when we went out there, as we went further down the hill, it seemed to get a better rate. But as I noted in the field, they needed to start at the good perk rates and go the direction of the good soil testing. And unfortunately, trench 1 and 2 in certain sections were close to the bad perk tests. And the only way we're going to know is by going back out and testing those areas to see if they're 39 minutes per inch or less. And we won't know that till that soil testing is completed. Thank you.
I'd also like to note, just for those who may be interested, just as we're looking at needing more testing here because of variable soils, there are times when testing is done and there's such homogeneity witnessed in the field that and then if the positioning doesn't end up to capture all of the test hits, the board goes the other direction too and says that there's some confidence there in the homogeneity. So soils are, subsurface work is more mysterious than some other things.
So
and
Daryl,
unpredictable.
again, recognizing it's 9:30 and
Julie,
yes,
may
and
I, there's been things that have been said I'd like to answer as the applicant, if that's possible, before you move on.
is it new information?
Daryl just said that the soils were inconsistent. The soils are all the same.
I think what she meant to say was the perk rates.
That's
Yeah,
not what
I
she
will
said.
let-
I can only be responsible for what she said, not what she meant. Excuse me.
But I will not
Apologies.
speak for Daryl.
Late.
And what I'd like to say is primarily now, so the Title V requires one percolation test. It says if you're above 2,000 gallons, which we're not, right? We're at 1,700. If you're above 2,000 gallons, Title V requires 3 perk tests. We currently have 5, and you're asking for 8 or 9. You're asking for 8 or 9 perk tests when Title V says for a larger system than ours, it requires 3. I just don't know where to go with made up regulations.
And it leaves it to the discretion of the board to require more. So I think
Triple?
we can come back to whether or not the board wants to discuss, vote on additional perk requirements. I think there are a few other elements, and we certainly will not get through this entire plan tonight. There are a few other elements, Daryl, I think you were potentially going to address. I know eventually we need to do a room count review in order to, again, just make an advice or give advice to the ZBA. Sorry, we're getting to the point of the night where I'm going to slow down here. And I think one of the other things that I believe Mark had mentioned is we've received a report from a consultant that has been hired by a group of abutters that addresses a groundwater mounding issue. And so I'm afraid I can't find where that report is in front of me. One of the issues that I think, in addition to with groundwater mounding, what is estimated in this model, the hand chooch is what he used, is that the mound will then reach into the system, and the amount of clearance that is needed under Title V will not be maintained. And he goes on to make a number of other issues. The point that, and I don't know if everyone's had a chance to at least skim that report. One of the points that was made is that while Title V does not require a groundwater mounding analysis for systems under 2000 GPD, there is language within Title V that allows local approving authorities discretion to make sure the spirit of Title V is being met in terms of protection of health and safety in groundwater. One of the things I think I would like to do is, again, we have a lot of legal questions tonight, is to go back and seek guidance from town council on the application of that part of Title V.
Yes, I believe that we should do that. We did not make that a requirement of this project because it didn't meet the threshold under Title V. But now an analysis using the data developed by the applicant's engineer was put into well-vetted software and has come up with an indication that there may not be adequate protection of groundwater quality from the system. And that's an important issue for us to consider as the Board of Health.
Daryl, is that something, do we just need to get a thumbs up from the board that they agree we should approach town council, or?
Well, we could either approach town council or we could make recommendations to ZBA.
I think ZBA will view that report in their own purview. I'm thinking about the interpretation of Title V and whether or not it is, given the kind of the language, I think it was 15.003. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me if I'm quoting it correctly, that suggests that local approving authorities.
Julie, if I can, you are correct. 15.003 of Title V, which starts with 310 CMR. So 310 CMR 15.003, labeled as coordination with local approving authorities. Thank you.
Thank you. I remembered it right. Does everyone agree that we should get legal counsel on that before proceeding?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I agree as well.
Okay. And
John,
so
can I just clarify something in Title V for you all?
I think we're actually, we're fine. We're
So you
asking.
don't want to hear from the applicant on the topic?
But you're not talking about the project, you're talking about how we should interpret Title V.
Well, I'm talking about the project within the context of Title V, and as the applicant, I'd like to speak to that, to the groundwater mounding issue particularly. You have not allowed me to speak to that tonight.
As long as you're cognizant of the time, go ahead.
It is 9:33.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm. So what Title V says is that if you're above 2,000 gallons, that you do the groundwater mounding and you calculate that, and then your separation to groundwater between the bottom of the system and groundwater. Whoops, you guys moved. Now I got to look in a different direction. Is done with that calculation of the mounding, okay? And therefore, it would be pretty reasonable to assume that if you're not above 2,000, you don't do that calculation and you don't put that into the separation. It's very clear that they wrote the regulation to be different for above 2,000 versus below 2,000. And it doesn't make any sense to me that you would ask me to do something that the code doesn't require.
I think we have a disagreement there. Yes, it is strictly written as 2,000, but then there is discretion based on site conditions, and that's what we're seeking counsel
Yeah,
on.
there's a lot of discretion that's talked about in this town.
Yep. Daryl, I don't know if you wanted to address other elements of this project tonight, and if we felt like we needed to have a motion of the board regarding the additional perk requirement. Oh no, I think we've lost Daryl maybe.
No, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm here.
sorry.
I was thinking about what I mean, I do think that there is a benefit to having the perk test. Our goal is to have a well-designed system that is tailored to the conditions and is going to be protective. And this is a pretty marginal system, what we've just learned through the Horsley analysis. There are risks associated with this.
In what ways is it marginal beyond depth to groundwater? It meets all of your regulations. So how is it marginal? You throw a term around that means nothing.
You've been speaking without being recognized frequently, and it is.
Right, I'm the applicant.
Yes, you are. And we have always, just the way I did with the groundwater mounding, stopped and allowed you to speak and respond. Please allow the chair to finish speaking. Go ahead, Daryl.
Which is difficult when one keeps getting interrupted. All right, losing my train of thought. Again, I actually don't know that I can formulate it.
Okay.
I can't get back on track. Sorry,
Well,
it's too late.
Late.
Too late
Yeah.
for this. And these are very serious topics, and I don't want to be I don't know what to say about this. This is a challenging project. These are very slow perk rates. There are going to be risks. We only allow up to 40 minutes per inch because a drying out period as effluent moves through the soil or the contaminants move through the soil is really important for virus and bacteria destruction. Having the mound coming up into the system is just helping to convey those pathogens in a way that testing has been done. If they stay wet, they can survive for years. They need a drying out period. That would be one of the things that makes the system more marginal in terms of protection of public health. In any case, do we want to vote to authorize Mark to I don't know that we've ever had to do that before. I feel like we're in new territory. Mark, I can't think of any other time where we've had to actually vote to authorize you to request additional. Do you think you need that?
You're muted, Mark.
Sorry, I'm sorry. If the board so wishes, that is always helpful and supportive.
Okay. All right. So I'll propose a motion and then we could have some discussion about it. Do we have a motion to authorize Mark to request that additional perk test be conducted?
And Darrell, if I can add, that is allowed under Title V, Section 310, 15.102-2 and 15.104-4. Those are Title V requirements that say additional testing can be required when the soils vary, as these do. And I just want to give you the backup of the reasoning why I believe why additional soil testing is required based on what I presented earlier. Thank you.
Okay. And
For the record.
all right, so that would be the motion. Then we could have some discussion because we haven't had a chance to discuss this yet.
So moved.
And seconded.
Okay. And so Mark,
Yes.
would it be possible if they comply and do more testing and you're there witnessing, are you able, as they go along, to determine in the field whether the testing then answers the questions that
Yes.
are trying to be answered?
Yeah, that's a good point, Darrell. When they apply for the soil testing, they should take the overlay that they're showing on the septic plan, and we can work together on this with the soil evaluator to note where the perks will need to be done to determine that distinction between the good perks or the better perks and the higher perk rates. I've been working with Deisheng on that, and he's still on. I don't know if he'll be the soil evaluator or if they're planning to use DGT, but whoever it is, that when they go to submit the soil test application, we can work on that soil test location plan at that time. But I think it was very clear that trenches 1 and 2, there's areas of unknowns, and that would be the starting point that we now know is the starting point based on the design that was presented to us. If that helps to clear it up.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions or comments?
That was actually my question. I want to make sure that we have specificity and clarity about where we're asking for additional perk tests. So that we're all on the same page before the excavator goes out there.
Yep. And that can be done at the soil test applications point.
Steve, I see your box is lit up, but no, okay. All right. Are we ready to vote? Okay.
Steve, do you want to lead us
So
off?
Steve, you're up.
Steve Constantine, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Okay.
Was there a motion made? And could you
Yes.
tell me what the motion was, please?
The motion was for the board to authorize Mark to request additional perk testing.
How
And then
many?
we clarified the process that identification could be made in the field about what was sufficient, when sufficient information was reached, that kind of thing. And he could work it out with whoever the soil evaluator would be representing you, the applicant.
So if Mark wants 12 perk tests, I do 12 perk tests. If Mark wants 18, I do 18. If he wants, I mean, what are we talking about here?
if Mark wants, not, it's what Mark wants. Title V allows the approving authority, which I would be on in the field that day, and hopefully Jessica, you can be with me too that day, to determine based on the variability of the soil, and it's in those two sections I just mentioned, Bob, in Title V, to make that determination. But we already know a lot about your property because there has been testing. So what I suggested is the soil evaluator submit with an overlay of the present septic system, the locations where they are planning the perk test, and to reach out to me first so we can go over this discussion we had tonight so it doesn't have to be back and forth. So that's what I'd suggest. It'll make it so much easier when you go to apply to have that soil evaluator contact me. Might it be Deschang or someone from DGT or whoever you wish to use, and then we'll schedule that date. And like I said, hopefully Jessica can be there, maybe some people from shared services as well, if you allow that, and we'll go from there. You know, that's how it works. You've been around enough to know how soil testing works. Thank you.
So
Alright.
is there anything that would drive up your estimate of 3 to 4 perk tests that you made
Only
earlier?
if they fail, or they're not the rates, let's put it this way, they're not the rates that the applicant's wishing to get, because they're trying to get the system to be a smaller size, and they're basing it on that 139 minute per inch rate and the others that were less than 39. But if they're higher rates, they're going to have to readjust where the system's going and determine, again, another line of where the good tests start and the bad test, or the test they don't want to utilize to design that septic system. A bad test would be anything over 60. They can design under it, but I think the goal, from discussing it with the soil evaluators as well as the applicant, is to try to get the system to hopefully be smaller than what was originally designed with the higher perk rate. And that all gets determined in the field, but at least minimal, I would say, what we discussed, at least a perk up near that 67 minute per inch rate, which was near trench 2 on the upper side at the end of the trench. And trench 1, it is unknown in a good length of that trench. So at least a minimum of 2 to help the applicant understand. It's not going to be 8, 16, 20, unless they feel then that they need to do more testing. And they may say, hey, you know, we may shift this system altogether in a different area. Then we're back to the drawing board if that's the case. And that's okay. That's allowed. You know, that's why we work together to make sure we can get the conclusive answers that are needed per Title V. Thank you.
So I guess I'm just confused because Title V says for over 2,000 gallons, it requires 3 perk tests.
We've
I've
actually,
given, may I finish, please, my sentence? It requires 3 for something over 2,000 gallons. You're now indicating to me that I'm going to be required to do 8 or 9 perk tests? That just seems arbitrary and capricious to me.
Bob, we've actually discussed this.
Have we?
Yes, we've actually, this is what we've been discussing, and what we actually voted on was Title V is written to give the local approving authority jurisdiction to be able to require more. We said
Which you did require more, and
then we saw, then we had to see the revised plan. We have seen the revised plan. We have seen the perks within the revised plan. And there is, our concern is the range of percolation rates and ensuring that there is consistency that throughout the entire length of the SAS, that nothing is exceeding what is being designed to, which is the 39 MPI. I think it's going on 10 o'clock. That we're obviously not done reviewing Brush Hill. We will be coming back to this many, many times. I think that we should be moving on from this topic, Daryl, to be cognizant of time. We still have other issues.
Yes. Yes. Okay. We're going to then finish up with 34 Brush Hill.
I'm sorry, so
Jessica?
that motion, I apologize, Chair Beardsley. I just wanted to make sure I have this correct. So that motion was for the board to authorize a request for additional perk tests near trenches 1 and 2 with determination.
Basically, but could we just do this by listening to the recording? rather than try to squeeze it back out of our heads right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear.
Okay. You can pull it from the recording tomorrow, or you can, so. Okay. All right. Mark, did you have any other applicant issues?
Did the board want to look at the floor plans that were populated on the land planning site? You don't have to tonight, but it shows the design for each unit, and there is some note that there will be a request for deed recordings for these units. So I wanted the board to determine if that's something you want to do tonight, or if you want to do that a different time.
I would be inclined to put that at the end if we still feel we have any oomph left. Does that sound okay with everyone?
I concur.
Okay.
I can.
Okay, great.
Hey, Daryl, did we?
All right.
Hang on, everyone, this is what happens when we get late. Did we vote on that last motion? We had a motion and a second.
Oh, you're
That's
right.
what
I don't
you
know
were
that we
asking
went
about,
around.
Jessica, huh?
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
that's
Okay.
what I was
So we
asking.
had a motion and a second.
Yes, and then
Those-
we had discussion because we
And we
hadn't
had
really
the
talked
discussion.
about the issue.
Okay.
And then
we
we
had
voted.
entertained questions. Yep. Okay. So any further discussion? Hearing none?
Darrell, if I may, is
Yes.
it, my suggestion is the board just vote to require, not to request, to require additional testing based on the
Mm,
overview I just gave you.
yes. That,
I don't think we're requiring. I think the board should vote to require that. I
Hmm.
gave enough information, I believe, to show there is some
there's a
unknown.
Yes.
need.
So I would ask that the motion be changed to say that the applicant is required to do additional testing in the areas of trench 1 and 2 as noted during our discussion. During your discussion, I'm sorry, not, but during my presentation.
Okay. That's better. I was thinking if they refuse, we might have to reject the application. I mean, they would
Yeah.
have a choice to refuse,
Yeah.
but require makes sense. And I think we've discussed enough of where, unless somebody wants to reformulate the motion.
And as long as that remains the soil absorption system area, that's the only other note that could be added. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we do need to go back and redo the whole thing. So do we have a motion to require additional perk testing in the areas? Are you comfortable with it being limited to trenches 1 and 2?
Yeah, the testing further down covers those areas. So yeah, no, those are the areas of unknown, and they're close to where the higher perk rates were. So I'm
Okay.
comfortable with that. And then unless the applicant changes the location of the soil absorption area, then we're back to step 1.
Yes.
For
Okay.
for the most recent revised plan showing the soil absorption area where it's located. Sorry.
Okay. So do I need to repeat that from the start, or I started it and Mark finished it?
I think I got the
Sounds
motion.
like we,
I think I'm following with you still.
we're requiring trenches 1 and 2, assuming the system stays where it is,
Exactly.
requiring additional perk testing. Witnessed by Mark.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Steve Constantine, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Darrell Beardsley, aye. Okay. Next topic. Pine residences. Did go to the ZBA meeting. I would say there's really nothing for us to review yet. Much debate going on about whether the information presented has been sufficient for further analysis above and beyond what was done in the past. the requests have been made for additional information. That would be the shortest summary I could think of for it. Although it wasn't, I think it was probably under an hour for the part of the meeting that was devoted to Pine residences, I guess, if you wanted to listen to it. And I think it started closer to 8 p.m. for that portion. Okay, regional school districts draft policy for managing mosquito-related health concerns. We just wanted to let you know that a number of us, both from the Sherborn Board of Health and Dover Board of Health, met with the regional school administration, including the superintendent and the head of athletics. Essentially, I don't know what the exact title is, to talk about the evening, late afternoon, evening programs for sports and how they might deal with both West Nile virus and triple E risks. Since we had that meeting, the risk levels have gone way down because we've had some cold snaps at night, and so that's pretty much knocked it back down. Dover was in a slightly higher category than Sherborn, which Sherborn was at the lowest, but again, just a function of whether a mosquito was grabbed at the right point near the border or something. But in any case, they prepared a policy for educating folks. We talked about options at that meeting. Those things were incorporated into the policies and plans that they had. And I believe that was in the documentation that was part of the documents for this meeting. So have any questions about it, let us know, or any comments. They'll take feedback, but I think it was pretty reasonable. And we also agreed that as things change, we'd be available to talk and discuss it. And the reason it was actually the late, the late teens, 20 teens, when Dover and Sherborn boards of health started collaborating more, especially on issues that pertain to the regional schools, just so that they wouldn't be getting different directions for the Sherborn school and then for the Dover collection of schools where then Sherborn students were going. So we just wanted to make it a little easier for the school administration to handle input from the two different boards and also negotiate out some of the things that might come up. Jessica, do you want to mention about the online payment portal?
Yes. So Jean and Pam Dallas Collector collaborated this week to set up the online payment system through Unibank, which is the current payment platform that other town departments use to pay permit fees online. So essentially, when an applicant submits a Board of Health application to us, they will now be provided a link from our office to pay online, and the implementation of this payment option streamlines the Board of Health's turnover process and alleviates the stress of an applicant needing to show up in person or send the fee by mail. At this point, permit fees can be paid for the following Board of Health applications, and these applications are pretty standard and fixed amounts. So food permits, residential kitchens, recreational camps, perk tests, septic and well applications, distribution box, repair and replacement of the septic tanks, septage haulers, disposal works installers, tobacco sales, and 10-day emergency beaver and muskrats. So note that more permit fee options can be added later to the portal if needed in the future. And the department is working towards bringing all of our applications in general, not just the payment, the option to pay online. So these fees can also be updated periodically, obviously contingent on the Board of Health and or Town of Sherborn's review and approval of the fee schedule. This is a great step forward for us.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda items for next meeting.
Darrell,
Last
if
thing
I
we have.
can,
Yes.
but the board members can go first. I apologize. I can wait.
No, go ahead.
I was going to suggest, we have a preliminary building application in that may be needed to be placed on the agenda. That's 26 Maple Street. And the reason I say that is because the board had approved the deed restriction on that property many years ago, I think 2009. So as a placeholder, I would suggest I will go over that plan with you and Jessica first, but put a placeholder on. But I was also looking at next year's calendar. I just happen to be looking at it for another purpose, and I don't know if the board's planning to set up the yearly meetings, but I don't know if we do that in November or December, but next January 1st falls on a Wednesday, just so you know. So which brought to my mind, oh, the board you may want to start looking at your noted meetings for next year. I can't remember when you used to do that. I don't know if it was.
Interesting twist, Mark. I do intend to be up very late.
Oh, okay. I do too, to some degree, if I can. But anyways, I just thought, I can't remember if the board would set the schedule of meetings in November or December the year before, but I know it was prior to January, obviously. So that's why I just thought I'd bring that up. And the other one I was just going to note is we've been discussing to some degree our fee schedule, as Jessica just noted most of them, and maybe looking at some changes. So that might be a possibility which is a regulation. So maybe have like a minor regulation overview sometime next year. I know you just feel like you finished it, but it'll be 2 years this coming year. So food for thought, maybe start with the regulation fees, the fees that are regulation, and look at some of our others that have been up for question.
Right, and just to add on,
Yeah.
just to add on that as well, for the fee schedules, shared services is doing a lot of our heavy lifting here to make sure that the fees are consistent across the 4 communities. So I think having that information in turn would be valuable to the board before we revise our fee schedule.
Do we have an idea of when they're going to come back with that? I know they're in process, but they have a number of towns that they have to go through and do an assessment.
Well, they said that they were going to do Needham first as a way of testing how much effort it took, because their original plan for how they were going to assess the fees would have required a lot of staff analysis of past effort, and given how variable projects are, I was just a bit concerned that would be burden more than help. We're hoping for kind of maybe a simpler comparison, just see where the ranges are and get a sense of the others. So what they decided to do was test out their methodology on Needham, who has a much larger staff compared to the other 3 towns in the shared services. And so haven't heard back on that, and we just had tomorrow's meeting had to get moved due to just change in availability of one of the participants. So I will ask for an update at next meeting on how that's going.
Yeah, it might help us time. I agree. It will be a regulation update that's required. It just might help us give a sense. I'm hopeful it could be next year, so we could actually do that.
Yeah.
Great.
Right, because we can't just change them. We do have to hold a public hearing.
Oh, yeah. Yes. No, I'm sorry. Knowing that it's a very lengthy process to change the regulation. I'm just trying to work forward from when we're going to get that data to be able to even start to draft anything.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
But once we have the data, it should make it much simpler to determine and to justify the rates. Okay. Anything else? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other discussion? Hearing none.
Steve Constantine, aye.
Julia Dreyfus, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Errol Beardsley, aye. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Oh,
Night.
good
Aye,
night.
Thank you.